The Galactic Empire had long been the dominant force in the universe, expanding its reach across countless planets. Its military was unparalleled, armed with advanced weaponry, power armor, and mechanized machines of war. The Empire's soldiers had faced and defeated alien species across the galaxy, each one more powerful and technologically advanced than the last. When Earth was discovered, it was quickly deemed inconsequential, a primitive planet with a civilization that could be easily crushed. The jungle-covered planet was seen as a mere obstacle to their goals, its untamed wilderness dismissed as nothing more than an inconvenience to be cleared away. The Empire's commanders, seated within the opulence of their advanced warships, were dismissive of Earth's environment. The dense jungles, teeming with wildlife and primitive landscapes, were nothing compared to the futuristic cities and colonies the Empire had conquered. Earth's native species, particularly humans, were viewed as no more than apes with technology at least 1,000 years behind the Empire's own. The Empire's soldiers were sent to Earth with one goal: to subjugate and tame it, just as they had done to countless other worlds. At first, the conquest seemed like an easy task. With their superior technology, the Empire's forces began to establish strongholds in Earth's jungles. Their advanced weapons, designed to cut through enemy forces with ease, were deployed without hesitation. They believed the primitive jungle would fall under the might of their firepower. The jungle would be cut down, civilization would spread, and humanity would bow to their superior strength. But as the galactic soldiers began their operations, something strange began to occur. At first, it was just a few minor inconveniences. Supply shipments were delayed, communication lines were disrupted, and soldiers began reporting strange movements in the jungle. Inexperienced scouts reported hearing odd noises, footsteps in the dark, the sound of leaves rustling when no animal was in sight. The soldiers laughed it off, assuming these were just the quirks of a primitive environment. However, these odd occurrences began to grow. Equipment started malfunctioning in the dense foliage. Sensors meant to detect enemy movement were consistently misfiring, giving false reports of activity where there was none. The soldiers' high-tech weaponry began to seem less reliable in the face of the unpredictable wilderness. Despite all the Empire's technological advances, the jungle seemed to have a life of its own, resisting the invaders at every turn. The first serious incident came when a group of galactic soldiers, sent to scout the jungle, disappeared without a trace. A small unit had ventured deep into the jungle, their mission to map the surrounding terrain and identify any potential threats. They were equipped with advanced cloaking devices and sensors to detect any movement, expecting little resistance from the primitive lifeforms of Earth. Yet, when the unit failed to return, the Empire was forced to launch a rescue mission. After hours of searching, the soldiers found nothing: no bodies, no weapons, no signs of struggle. The only evidence left behind were faint marks on the trees and the ground, something human, but foreign. They looked like traps, skillfully crafted by an unknown force. As the Empire sent in more soldiers, their frustrations grew. The jungle seemed to mock them, with its dangerous wildlife and unforgiving terrain. No matter how advanced their technology was, it couldn't overcome the wild, unpredictable nature of Earth's environment. Every step they took deeper into the jungle seemed to lead them into more danger. The soldiers began to question the Empire's initial assessment of the planet. They were accustomed to fighting against enemies who relied on technology, enemies they could track, defeat, and control. But Earth's wilderness was something else entirely. It wasn't just a force of nature, it was an enemy that could not be seen, that worked in silence, that used the land as its ally. The galactic commanders, sitting in their distant warships, began to grow anxious. They had not anticipated this level of resistance. The reports from the soldiers were troubling, and they began to suspect that something more than just wildlife was causing the disturbances. But they could not fathom what. Earth's humans were primitive. How could they be behind these well-coordinated attacks? And yet, the soldiers' reports told a different story. Strange, expertly set traps were being discovered in the jungle. Snares, pits, and hidden weapons, devices that could only have been made by someone familiar with the jungle, someone who knew how to use it to their advantage. The Empire's elite soldiers, trained for combat against highly advanced enemies, were starting to feel the pressure. Despite all their weapons and technology, they could not defeat an unseen enemy that used the jungle as a weapon. At first, it was a few small skirmishes, surprise attacks from invisible forces that left the galactic soldiers disoriented and confused. But it didn't take long for the attackers to strike hard. The Empire's forces, usually well organized and disciplined, found themselves scattered, unable to coordinate their efforts in the dense jungle. What had started as a simple conquest of a backwater planet had now turned into a battle for survival. The Galactic Empire, accustomed to crushing weaker species without breaking a sweat, was now facing an unknown and unyielding force. They had underestimated Earth's wilderness, assuming it was nothing more than a backdrop for their invasion. But the jungle was far more than just a collection of trees and animals. It was alive, it was intelligent, and it was fighting back. The soldiers, once so sure of their superiority, were beginning to realize that their greatest weapon, their technology, was now their greatest liability. Earth's warriors were not using lasers or advanced machinery to fight back. They were using something much older, much more primal. The jungle itself was their weapon. And it was a weapon the Galactic Empire was unprepared to face. As more soldiers disappeared into the jungle, the galactic commanders were forced to reconsider their approach. They had underestimated Earth's wilderness, and they were paying the price. This was no longer just about conquering a planet, it was about survival. The Galactic Empire had thought they were dealing with primitive humans and a wild environment. What they didn't understand was that Earth's true strength lay not in its technology, but in its ability to adapt, to survive, and to use nature itself as a weapon. With each passing day, the Empire's forces began to falter, their confidence shattered by the relentless jungle and its mysterious defenders. The Galactic Empire, for the first time, was learning a bitter lesson: nature was a force to be reckoned with. And Earth's warriors, those who lived and thrived in its wilderness, would prove to be the greatest threat the Empire had ever faced. The Jungle's Special Forces were Earth's hidden guardians, an elite group of soldiers, each honed through years of survival and combat training within Earth's most dangerous environments. These men and women were not like any army the Galactic Empire had encountered. They weren't armed with futuristic technology or power armor. Instead, they were experts in using the land to their advantage. They had spent their lives in Earth's dense jungles, mastering its unpredictable terrain, learning how to become invisible to the untrained eye. They didn't rely on advanced weapons, they were the weapon. Each member of the Jungle's Special Forces had a unique background. Some had been former military personnel who had survived the harshest conditions known to man. Others had grown up in remote villages, learning to live off the land, hunting, and fishing, with nothing more than primitive tools. Some were descendants of indigenous tribes whose ancestors had lived in harmony with the jungle for centuries. They were all united by one common bond, a deep respect for the jungle, and an unwavering commitment to defend Earth from any threat, no matter how advanced or deadly. They had trained for years, honing skills that no high-tech weapon could replicate. Their training was rigorous, weeks spent in the wild, without any external supplies or help. They learned to move silently through the thickest foliage, to camouflage themselves so completely that even the sharpest eyes couldn't detect them. They learned how to survive on nothing but the resources the jungle provided, crafting weapons from rocks, vines, and wood. They were experts in tracking, reading signs that others would miss. Every crack in a branch, every bent leaf, every shift in the wind, these were all messages, telling the Jungle's Special Forces exactly where their enemy was, and what they planned to do next. In addition to these survival skills, they were also masters of guerrilla warfare. The Galactic Empire's soldiers were used to direct, head-on combat, relying on their superior technology and firepower to overwhelm their enemies. But the Jungle's Special Forces didn't fight that way. They used the terrain to disorient their enemies, leading them into hidden traps, ambushing them from above and below. The jungle was their domain, and they had turned it into a deadly weapon. What the Galactic Forces didn't realize was that they were not fighting a traditional enemy. They were fighting the very land itself. The members of the Jungle's Special Forces knew the jungle like the back of their hands. They had spent years studying its rhythms, its cycles, and its dangers. They knew when the rains would come, how the animals would behave, and where the most dangerous plants grew. They had perfected the art of using the environment as a shield and a sword. They didn't need to rely on technology to fight, they relied on instinct, training, and the jungle itself. When the Galactic Forces first began their invasion, the jungle's special forces had watched from the shadows. They had seen the Empire's soldiers march into the jungle with their advanced weaponry and their arrogant sense of superiority. They knew that the Empire was underestimating Earth's wilderness. They could already sense the tension in the air. The Empire's forces were not prepared for the jungle's unpredictability. They had seen the signs, the missing soldiers, the strange movements, the feeling that they were being watched. The Galactic Empire thought they were the superior force, but the jungle's special forces knew that Earth's true strength was not in its cities or technology. It was in its wild places, its untamed lands, and the humans who had learned to thrive in them. The jungle's special forces didn't need to confront the Empire head-on. They didn't need to engage in a battle of superior firepower. Instead, they employed the tactics they knew best: stealth, sabotage, and ambush. The Empire's soldiers had no idea what was coming. They thought the drones and sensors would keep them safe, but the jungle was too unpredictable for technology to track. The jungle's special forces used the land to move undetected, leaving no trace of their presence. They knew that the Empire's soldiers would never be able to find them if they didn't want to be found. The first signs of the jungle's special forces' involvement were small but significant. The Galactic Empire's supply lines began to falter. Convoys carrying vital resources were ambushed, their vehicles destroyed, their supplies taken. The Galactic soldiers were left scrambling, trying to figure out what was happening. But they couldn't see their attackers. They only saw the destruction left behind: trees broken, branches snapped, and the telltale signs of traps expertly set to incapacitate or kill. As the Galactic forces pushed deeper into the jungle, they became increasingly frustrated. Their technology, which had served them so well on other planets, was failing them here. Their communications were jammed. Their drones were hacked or destroyed. Their most advanced weapons were rendered ineffective by the unpredictable terrain. Every attempt to advance further into the jungle was met with more resistance. The soldiers began to feel the oppressive weight of the jungle, pressing in from all sides. They could hear the rustle of leaves in the wind, but when they turned, no one was there. They could feel the eyes of their enemies upon them, but when they searched, they found nothing. It was as if the jungle itself had come alive, fighting back against the invaders. The jungle special forces knew exactly how to use the Empire's over-reliance on technology against them. The Empire's soldiers depended on their sensors and drones to track enemies, but the jungle's dense canopy blocked the signals. The dense foliage distorted their communications. The jungle special forces moved silently, using the natural elements of the jungle to hide their presence. They didn't need sophisticated cloaking devices. They were the camouflage. They could blend into the jungle with ease, using the trees, the undergrowth, and the shadows to hide from the Empire's high-tech surveillance. As the Empire's forces continued to suffer setbacks, the jungle's special forces turned up the heat. They began to set more elaborate traps, pitfalls, snares, and spikes hidden in the ground, waiting for the unsuspecting Galactic soldiers to fall into them. These traps were not just physical, they were psychological. The soldiers began to question everything they saw. Was that movement in the trees a shadow, or was it an enemy soldier? Was that noise just the wind, or was it someone preparing to strike? The jungle was closing in on them, and the Empire's soldiers had no idea how to fight back. They couldn't even tell where the attacks were coming from. The Galactic Empire's forces had thought they were entering a war they could easily win. They had underestimated Earth's wilderness and the warriors who had adapted to it. Now, they were trapped in a nightmare they could not escape, facing an enemy that was as invisible as the jungle itself. They had walked into a fight they couldn't win. The jungle's special forces had already won the battle without ever revealing themselves. The Galactic forces, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer firepower, began to realize they had made a critical mistake. Their arrogance had clouded their judgment, and now they were paying the price. As their soldiers struggled to maintain control over the jungle, the realization dawned on them. They were up against something far more dangerous than primitive humans. They were facing an enemy that knew the land better than they knew their own weapons. The Empire's military might, no matter how advanced, could not compete with the ruthless cunning of the jungle's special forces. The first major setback occurred when a convoy carrying vital supplies was ambushed. The soldiers, heavily armored and armed with the latest weaponry, had been confident in their mission, expecting little resistance. But the jungle, alive with hidden dangers, had other plans. The convoy was completely wiped out, with no survivors. The wreckage was scattered across the jungle, the soldiers' bodies taken by the wilderness, leaving behind only broken tech and the eerie silence of the jungle. The Empire had lost an entire convoy, and no one knew how or why. The Galactic Command, in disbelief, quickly launched a search and rescue mission. But as they ventured deeper into the jungle, the situation only worsened. The soldiers, once proud of their superior technology, found themselves completely outmatched. Their drones malfunctioned, their sensors failed, and their communication systems were jammed. They tried to send in reinforcements, but they never returned. What had been a simple mission to secure the area had turned into a nightmare. The Empire's soldiers, so used to dominating weaker species, were now on the back foot, trying desperately to survive in a hostile environment that seemed to fight back at every turn. The Galactic Empire's commanders were not accustomed to defeat. They had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, conquering planet after planet without much resistance. But this was different. Earth's jungle had proven to be an impenetrable fortress, and the Empire's advanced technology was useless against it. The jungle itself seemed to be conspiring against them, twisting and turning, hiding dangers at every corner. The Empire's soldiers, once confident in their strength, now found themselves being hunted, not by an army, but by shadows in the trees. At first, the galactic forces tried to fight back with brute force. They called in airstrikes, sending bombs to obliterate the jungle, hoping to burn away whatever was hiding within. But their efforts were in vain. The jungle's special forces had anticipated this. The dense foliage of the jungle absorbed the shockwaves, and the bombs did little to slow down the guerrilla fighters. The jungle's special forces had learned to adapt to the land, and they knew how to use it to their advantage. They didn't need to fight the Empire head-on. They simply used the jungle to turn the tide in their favor. The galactic soldiers quickly learned that their technology could not guarantee victory in this unfamiliar terrain. Their weapons jammed, their drones were taken out by simple traps, and their armor, designed to withstand enemy fire, was no match for the traps set by the jungle's special forces. The soldiers had been trained to fight other advanced armies, but they were not prepared for this. The jungle was a living thing, and it was constantly shifting. Every step they took seemed to lead them deeper into danger. Every move they made was watched by unseen eyes, and every sound they made was answered by the silence of the jungle. Frustration mounted within the ranks of the galactic forces. The soldiers were used to moving quickly, striking hard, and leaving nothing behind. But here, in the jungle, they were slowed down. Their advanced technology failed them. Their enemies were invisible, elusive, and relentless. The Galactic Empire's soldiers began to realize they were not just fighting a physical war, they were fighting a psychological battle. The fear of the unknown began to creep into their minds. They didn't know where the next attack would come from, and they didn't know who, or what, was attacking them. The jungle, in all its mysterious glory, was closing in on them, and they had no idea how to escape. The Empire's elite soldiers, once filled with confidence, now felt vulnerable. The more they fought, the more they realized that they were being led into a trap. The jungle's special forces had no intention of facing them directly. Instead, they had turned the environment itself into a weapon. The galactic soldiers had underestimated Earth's warriors, thinking that their technology would easily overpower the primitive humans. But they soon discovered that Earth's true strength lay in its wilderness, and in the humans who had learned to adapt and thrive in it. The soldiers, their morale shattered, began to question their mission. What had started as a simple invasion had turned into a war of attrition. The galactic forces were losing soldiers, supplies, and territory, and they had no clear path to victory. The Jungle Special Forces, on the other hand, had nothing to lose. They were fighting for their home, and they knew the land better than anyone. They understood that the jungle was not a barrier, but a weapon they could use to drive the invaders out. With every passing day, the Galactic Forces became more desperate. They tried to send in reinforcements, but they too were lost in the jungle. The Jungle's Special Forces had learned to use their knowledge of the land to their advantage, and they had anticipated the Empire's every move. The Galactic Empire's soldiers began to realize that they were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted. The jungle had become their enemy, and it was winning. The realization hit hard: the Empire could not conquer Earth's jungle, and it could not defeat the humans who had learned to survive within it. The jungle's special forces had proven that Earth's wilderness was not a weakness, it was a strength. The galactic forces, once confident in their technological superiority, had been brought to their knees by an enemy they had underestimated. Earth's warriors, invisible in the shadows, had turned the tide of the battle, and the Galactic Empire had no choice but to retreat. As the galactic forces began to pull back, the jungle's special forces watched from the trees. They had won, not through advanced technology or superior firepower, but through knowledge, patience, and the unyielding power of Earth's wilderness. The Galactic Empire had learned a harsh lesson: never underestimate the strength of a world that has learned to fight in silence. The Galactic Empire's retreat was not a graceful one. For the first time in their history, they had faced an enemy they could not easily crush. Their technology, which had dominated countless worlds, had failed them against an adversary that didn't rely on high-tech weapons but instead used the land itself as a weapon. The jungle's special forces had proven that Earth's wilderness was not to be underestimated. The Empire's once proud forces were now humbled, their morale shattered, and their commanders in complete disarray. What should have been an easy conquest had turned into a catastrophic failure. The Empire's commanders convened in a desperate meeting, trying to salvage what little they could of their operation. They had lost more soldiers than they cared to admit, their advanced equipment had been rendered useless, and their carefully planned strategies had fallen apart in the face of an unexpected and cunning enemy. The galactic forces had always been able to overpower any resistance with sheer firepower, but Earth had shown them that brute force could not defeat an invisible, elusive enemy who understood the land better than they ever could. The galactic generals had expected Earth's jungle to be a mere inconvenience, something to be bulldozed and cleared with little effort. Instead, they found themselves fighting a war they didn't understand, fighting the jungle itself, fighting the people who had learned to survive within it. The jungle had become a living, breathing force, and the humans who had adapted to it were the true masters of the land. The Galactic Empire had underestimated Earth, and they had paid the price for it. As the Empire regrouped and tried to plan their next move, they were faced with an undeniable truth: they could not win this war. The jungle special forces, though few in number, had managed to outmaneuver the Empire's best troops at every turn. They had turned Earth's wilderness into a weapon, using it to neutralize the Empire's technological advantage. The galactic soldiers had been trained to fight in cities, on barren planets, and in space, but they were completely unprepared for the challenges of Earth's untamed jungles. The Empire's retreat was not a simple withdrawal, it was a complete collapse. The galactic forces, once so confident in their ability to conquer any world, were now fleeing in disarray. The jungle had claimed them, and the jungle's special forces had proven that no matter how advanced a civilization was, it could never conquer a planet's wild heart. The Galactic Empire had underestimated Earth's people, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The jungle's special forces, however, were not content with just driving the invaders back. They knew that the Galactic Empire would never stop. It had conquered countless worlds, and Earth was just another prize in their endless expansion. The jungle's victory was only temporary unless the Empire was completely driven off the planet. The jungle's special forces, though victorious, understood the war was not over. The Empire would regroup, reinforce, and attempt another invasion. This time, however, they would be ready. The jungle's special forces knew that the Empire would not simply retreat forever. The loss of soldiers and resources was a blow, but the Galactic Empire's ambition was insatiable. Earth's victory in this battle was just a small part of a larger war that would continue as long as the Empire sought to expand its reach. The Jungle Special Forces had learned that the only way to protect Earth's wilderness was to make sure that the Galactic Empire knew that Earth was not an easy conquest. The Empire had to be shown that Earth's people and its jungles were not to be trifled with. The fight for Earth's survival was not over, it had only just begun. As the Galactic forces retreated, the Jungle Special Forces began to regroup and prepare for the inevitable second wave. They had already proved their worth once, but they knew that one victory would not be enough. The jungle was vast, and they would need to expand their efforts to every corner of the planet. The Galactic Empire would return with new tactics, new strategies, and more advanced technology. But the Jungle Special Forces were ready. They had learned from the first battle and understood the Empire's methods. They knew that the fight would not be won through technology or firepower, it would be won through patience, strategy, and a deep understanding of the land. In the aftermath of the Galactic retreat, Earth's forces began to rebuild their defenses. The Jungle Special Forces, though victorious, were not foolish enough to believe that the war was over. They knew the Empire would never stop trying to conquer Earth. The Galactic forces had been forced to retreat, but they would return, stronger and more determined than ever. The Jungle Special Forces were prepared for this eventuality. They would continue to fight for their home, using the very land they protected as a weapon against the invaders. The Empire would never fully understand what they were up against. The jungle was not just a barrier to them, it was a living force, and the Jungle Special Forces were its masters. The Galactic Empire had learned a hard lesson. It had learned that no matter how advanced their technology, no matter how many soldiers they sent, they could never defeat Earth's wilderness. They had learned that the land was not just an obstacle, it was a weapon. The Galactic forces, once so proud, were now licking their wounds, knowing that Earth had defeated them not with superior technology, but with superior knowledge of the land. The Jungle Special Forces had proven that there was more to warfare than technology and firepower. It was about understanding the terrain, using the environment to your advantage, and fighting with the heart of the land itself. As the Galactic Empire's forces regrouped in their ships, readying themselves for another attempt at Earth's conquest, they were met with the harsh reality that they had underestimated the one thing they could not control: the jungle. The battle for Earth had just begun, and the Jungle Special Forces were prepared for whatever came next.